Welcome to the Good for America podcast. I'm your host, former Congressman Bob Good, former chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. I'm going to remind you to subscribe to the podcast, rate the show, refer it to your friends, and follow me on social media at Rep Bob Good. First off, I do want to just say happy Veterans Day. I want to wish a wonderful Veterans Day to our former service members and their families. America is free because of the 1% who serve and sacrifice on our behalf. So thank you to all our vets and families to whom we owe an enormous debt of gratitude. I'm thankful, as many Americans are, for what President Trump and Secretary Hegseth are doing for our veterans and our military, with the renewed focus on the purpose of the military and taking care of our veterans. So again, happy Veterans Day. Well, as we look at the midterm or the election results from last week, it certainly is disappointing, if not terribly surprising, that Democrats won the three big elections last Tuesday. Of course, we're referring to the New York City mayoral election, the New Jersey gubernatorial election, and the Virginia governor's race. It's disappointing, but not terribly surprising that Democrats prevailed in all three. New York City is obviously a lost cause at present. New York City is obviously a lost cause at the present. Non-U.S. born voters overwhelmingly voted for the anti-American candidate that was and is Mamdani. Elections have consequences, and New York City residents will suffer as a result of their choices. Virginia is a blue state. We have to acknowledge and admit that Virginia isn't purple. Through massive immigration and the explosion of the federal workforce, Virginians are no longer voting for our founding principles. A majority of Virginians are not voting for our Judeo-Christian values, morality, family, marriage. A majority of Virginians are no longer voting for limited government, freedom, individual responsibility, or federalism, meaning a small central federal government and power to the people in the states. Virginians aren't voting for that anymore. But again, Virginia is not a purple state. Virginia is a blue state. Virginia hasn't voted Republican in a presidential election since 2004. That means 5 straight presidential elections Virginia has went for the Democrat candidate. Virginia hasn't elected a Republican to the Senate, to the U.S. Senate, since 2002. That was 23 years ago, and that was the very liberal John Warner, who served 30 years, and during that time, especially towards the latter years, was just as likely to support Democrats as Republicans. Democrats won 4 of 5 governor races in Virginia since 1997, before Governor Youngkin was elected with less than 51% of the vote 4 years ago, in reaction to the extreme policies of Ralph Northam and Joe Biden in Richmond and in Washington, respectively. New Jersey is an even deeper blue state than Virginia. New Jersey hasn't elected a Republican to the Senate since 1972, or 53 years ago. New Jersey hasn't went Republican in a presidential election since George H.W. Bush in 1988. So that was 37 years ago, meaning 9 straight presidential races for Democrats in New Jersey. From 1998 through 2024, every margin in the presidential race in New Jersey, everyone except one, which was 2004, has been won by 15 points or more for the Democrat candidate. So New Jersey hasn't been close in presidential races since 1996. And while the governor's races have been more competitive in New Jersey, as they sometimes are in blue and red states for the other party, New Jersey hasn't elected a Republican as governor since 2013. So we want to have perspective and context in the results of these races in New York City, Virginia, New Jersey, and recognize that these are blue areas where Democrats are supposed to win. So we want to have perspective and context as we look at the results, but we want to have the appropriate amount of concern as well. And the concern is certainly warranted. Because while the results ultimately weren't surprising, that Mamdani and the very liberal Democrat former Congress members, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey, it's not surprising that these folks won, but the extremism of the candidate Mamdani in New York City And the margins in Virginia and New Jersey are obviously very concerning. The results, when you talk about the numbers, were worse than predicted. Mamdani in New York City will present the most extreme, blatant, explicit, socialist, communist, high-profile elected leader in American history. Let me repeat that. Mamdani will present and does present the most extreme, blatant, explicit, socialist, communist, high-profile elected leader in American history. New York City residents and Virginia will see the impact of true Democrat policies on display in full force. New York City residents and Americans are about to see the impact of true Democrat policies on display in full force in New York City under Mamdani. While this will be bad in the short run for New York City and Americans with the outsized impact and influence of New York City, perhaps the silver line positive in the long run is the painful lessons that will be learned. So again, it'll be bad in the short run because of the terrible policies and the suffering that New York City residents in particular will suffer. Hopefully there's a silver lining in the long-term lesson that's learned and the pain that is experienced that helps people to open their eyes and to see what's wrong with Democrat socialist policies. With respect to New Jersey and Virginia, with the margins of the victories, the margins on Tuesday revealed that there was a lack of enthusiasm, excitement, or passion or incentive to vote for Republicans. There's no way to escape the conclusion that there was a lack of enthusiasm, excitement, passion on the Republican side. After being told that the polls were close in New Jersey, the liberal Mikey Sherrill won by 14 points. We were told that Citarelli had a chance to win in New Jersey and a better chance to win than we had here in Virginia. But again, Mikey Sherrill won by 14 points. And while Abigail Spanberger was the odds-on favorite, she led the entire way in this race. She was always favored to win. No one was predicting a 15-point win. The government shutdown obviously helped Spanberger and helped Democrats generally, but particularly here in Virginia. You've got 140,000 to 150,000 federal workers in Virginia. And when you think about their immediate family, spouse, children, extended family, parents, brothers and sisters, and so forth, that easily represents more than 500,000 people directly impacted by the government shutdown. And so the margin of victory was 500,000 in Virginia. So that's easily explainable to a large degree by the government shutdown and the federal workers who were upset about not getting paid. They should, of course, been blaming Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. But since these federal workers vote some 90% for Democrats, I'm sure that as they're watching MSNBC and CNN, ABC, CBS, and NBC, which were blaming Trump and Republicans for the shutdown, that motivated them tremendously to turn out and to vote Democrat. But staying in Virginia here, many of us thought that Jay Jones, the Attorney General candidate, would lose the race to the incumbent and better funded Jason Miyares. Jason Miyares running for re-election. He was a competent, capable attorney general, didn't do anything stupid or really controversial to warrant not winning re-election. And he had more money than the Democrat challenger, Jay Jones, which almost never happens in elections where Republicans have more money. So many of us, I thought that Jason Miyares would win. But sadly and shockingly, a majority of voters in Virginia supported the attorney general candidate who wishes death on 45% of Virginians and their children, not to mention police officers. The text messages that Jay Jones was exposed to have been sending talked about wishing death on his political opponents and their children. And he wished death on more cops so they would, in his words, stop shooting people. Who thinks that way? Who thinks the way that Jay Jones does? What kind of person believes in that mentality? And yet, almost 60% of Virginia voters apparently approved. Again, almost 60% of Virginia voters approved or at least didn't care about what kind of a person and what the viewpoint is of now Attorney General-elect Jay Jones, the radical leftist, as our new chief law enforcement officer in Virginia come January. So again, elections have consequences. And with voters also giving Democrats 13 more House seats in the General Assembly, then they're going to have near supermajority status in the House. They have a majority in the Senate. So Virginians are going to suffer, as we did under Ralph Northam several years ago. Just think back, Virginians, to the extremism that was Ralph Northam and Democrats when they had full control of government after he was elected in 2017. So from 2018 through 2021, how Democrats went so extreme on climate policies and anti-affordable, reliable energy, extreme on wind and solar, their LGBT policies, their indoctrination in our schools, the diversity, equity, inclusion policies, critical race theory being promoted and taught in our schools, assaulting our Second Amendment rights, promoting and protecting abortion on demand up to the moment of birth at any time for any reason, and Ralph Northam himself even advocating for abortion after birth. And then how extreme he was on COVID and the COVID policies, the mask requirements, the shutdowns, the closing down churches and places of worship, or having conditions on whether or not, how and when, under what condition they could assemble and worship. How short is the political electoral memory of Virginians in electing Democrats again and giving Democrats full control of government? Or maybe it's worse than that. Maybe Virginia voters actually know what they're voting for and what they're going to get with Abigail Spanberger and a supermajority in the House of Delegates and a majority in the Senate in Virginia. And maybe that's what they want. That's what they know they're voting for, a majority of Virginians. But Democrats now are threatening right to work and Virginia as a preferred business climate. They're trying to redistrict Virginia and to try to take Virginia's Democrat majority in Congress from 6-5 to 10-1, or at least 9-2. Vexit, Western Virginia leaving counties in Western Virginia, leaving and becoming a part of West Virginia. Again, counties in Western Virginia, leaving and becoming a part of West Virginia was talked about 5 years ago. That will undoubtedly be discussed again. I think you're going to start to hear rumblings about that and efforts for counties in Virginia that want to split off and join West Virginia as a result of what has happened in this election. So what did happen? I would point out at first that the mentality of voting for the lesser of two evils, which has resulted in continuous loss of freedoms, more government, $38 trillion in debt on the national level at the hands of both parties. We see the results of the lesser of two evils mentality on who we vote for. This reached a new low in New York City with Andrew Cuomo, and in Virginia for Christian conservatives who were supporting the openly homosexual John Reed for lieutenant governor. So again, the mentality of let's just vote for the lesser of two evils was at a new low in New York City with Andrew Cuomo, and in Virginia with Christian conservatives who were compromising and voting for the openly homosexual John Reed as lieutenant governor. New York City has gotten so bad that Andrew Cuomo was presented as a supposed reasonable, moderate Democrat. There were so-called Republicans and even some conservatives trying to put a positive face on the liberal socialist Cuomo, who was one of the worst governors in America and whose policies cost countless lives during COVID. Calls by President Trump and others to support Cuomo instead of the Republican nominee, Curtis Sliwa, were undoubtedly deflating to New York City Republicans and to Sliwa, who ended up with only 7% of the vote. So obviously a lot of Republicans either didn't vote or voted for Andrew Cuomo. Why bother to try as a Republican in New York City or other blue areas if you're going to have Republicans come out and call for you for voters to support a liberal socialist like Andrew Cuomo? And what has the lesser of two evils gotten us? What has voting for the lesser of two evils gotten us? I submit that it's better to offer the voters something, anything to support, some reason to vote Republican, even if it means you might ultimately lose, than to just try to manage the decline via the lesser of two evils. Again, it's better to offer voters something, anything to support, some reason to vote Republican, even at the risk of losing, than it is to just try to manage the decline in this country by voting for the lesser of two evils. And that's what moderate establishment, Rhino, the Republican Party at large is doing, is just trying to manage the decline of this country. The Uniparty, the Democrat-Republican Uniparty has joined together to give us more government, more debt, and less freedom as a result of both. Less freedom as a result of more government and more debt at the hands of both Republicans and Democrats. And so we saw last Tuesday no passion, no intensity for conservative voters, especially without President Trump on the ballot for many voters. So again, what does the Republican Party truly stand for? Going into last Tuesday, and now in the aftermath of last Tuesday, what are the sacred principles, non-negotiables, red lines, the issues worth standing and fighting for Republicans? And I'm talking about the party. I'm talking about the candidates. I'm talking about elected Republicans. I'm talking about Republican Party officials, Republican Party operatives. What are the sacred principles, the non-negotiables, the red lines, the issues worth standing and fighting for? In Virginia over the past several months, no one I spoke with could tell me what our gubernatorial candidate, Winsome Sears, stood for. When I would ask Republicans, what does Winsome Sears stand for? What is she fighting for? Except the status quo, meaning keep a good thing going was kind of the tagline. Let's just keep Republicans in office because of the victories 4 years ago. But no one could tell me what Winsome Sears stood for, what she was fighting for. It all seemed to be about making diversity history, being the first Black woman elected governor in the United States. And it all seemed to be about just not being a Democrat. John Reed, the lieutenant governor candidate, divided or at least conflicted Republicans on what, again, was a key moral issue. He was also trying to make diversity history, but the worst of all kinds, by trying to be the first openly gay individual to be elected statewide in Virginia, at least. So what did Republicans get for compromising their principles in this past election? And for that matter, when has it worked before, or to what end? Republicans have to give voters a reason to turn out and vote for them. If you're going to lose fighting for something. I often tell new candidates when they come and talk with me at the local, state, federal level, run your race. Don't run somebody else's race. Win or lose, do it with your principles, your values, your integrity that's intact when it's over. Don't listen to the consultants, the so-called experts, the donors, the party leaders, and so, et cetera. Run your race, your principles, your positions, your policies, your values. Finish with your head held high, hopefully victorious. Because voters and the electorate and people across this country, they are looking for courageous, conservative fighters, people of integrity, people of principle, people who are trustworthy, who are honest, who they can believe in. If they don't agree with you on every issue, but they trust you, they respect you, they know your principles, they know your integrity, then they will give you some grace if there's some difference in policies or difference in some beliefs and values. But again, run with integrity, run your race based on your principles. Speaking of President Trump and him not being on the ballot in the elections last Tuesday, there was a Trump effect with this race, and he essentially was on the ballot. At least his presidency was on the ballot. He loomed large over the election, as he has in every election since he was first elected in 2016. And as always, he brings a reaction, a backlash, as he is a polarizing, motivating figure like no other. President Trump brings a reaction like nobody else. Those who love him don't show up so often when he's not on the ballot. And that happened certainly here in Virginia, where so many Trump voters did not show up because he wasn't on the ballot, because he was not enthusiastically in support of Winsome Sears. Matter of fact, he did a teletown hall on the eve of the election and didn't even mention her name. So many Trump voters don't show up when he's not on the ballot, didn't show up in Virginia certainly last week. But those who hate President Trump or against President Trump, they certainly show up and did show up. And so President Trump, whether he's on the ballot or not, he drives a negative response and turnout. and he tends to repel all but the most loyal and supportive followers and voters. And again, meanwhile, too many Trump voters don't show up for anyone else. And we need every single Republican voting to have any kind of a chance in a blue state like Virginia or New Jersey. The Dems were clearly highly motivated in reaction to what happened last November, in reaction to Republican policies over the last 10 months and the government shutdown. But I will also submit that it doesn't help that President Trump seems to be in denial about the affordability crisis that exists in this country. President Trump seems to be in denial about the affordability crisis in this country, and that impacts all Republicans who are running for election. President Trump claims the economy is historically great and prices are way down. That's just not true. The economy is getting better and inflation has slowed, but the economy is not historically great and prices are not way down yet. Instead, we need President Trump and all Republicans to acknowledge that groceries, housing, utilities, and gasoline prices are a problem and they're too high. Everybody that has to actually buy gas and groceries and pay the bills knows this. And it's embarrassing for Republicans to claim, President Trump or other Republicans to claim that that prices are down or that the inflation crisis is over, the affordability crisis doesn't exist. That's simply not true. Now, to be clear, it's not the fault of Trump or the Republicans. They did inherit from 4 years of Joe Biden and Democrat terrible policies. But Republicans need to act more quickly. Republicans and President Trump need to act more quickly and boldly to cut spending. It's all about the spending. It's all about the money. Again, it's always and only about the money in Washington and when it comes to government. Cut the spending, shrink the government. Trump should focus and force other Republicans to focus on cutting spending, shrinking government, and therefore reducing inflation and addressing the causes of the affordability crisis. President Trump shouldn't be focused on things like ballrooms. Stop bragging about the ballroom. Stop talking about the Nobel Prize. Who cares about that? Stop worrying about late night talk show hosts. Just laugh with them when they make jokes about you. Stop talking about unconstitutional third terms and getting rid of members of Congress from Kentucky. Stop focusing on Canadian TV ads about Reagan and tariffs. Stop talking about 50-year mortgage loans, which would exacerbate the housing crisis. Let's address the cause of the housing affordability crisis, again, by cutting spending. And stop talking about things like $2,000 stimulus checks. That's how we got into this mess with the government spending. Let's just cut the spending, pay down the debt, shrink government. That is conservative policies. That's what will help Americans. We compromising Republicans didn't need more fear going into the midterms. Republicans were already afraid of next year's midterms, and they didn't need more things to be scared about, which is what they probably got with respect to the election results last week. Now, it would be helpful if they would be fearful in the right way and become emboldened and courageous and more determined to do the right things while they have power and while they have the opportunity. And as I've said before, it would be worth getting rid of the filibuster or modifying the filibuster if Republicans would use it to cut spending, shrink government, and to enact true conservative policies that they ran on. That would be worth changing the filibuster to do, but I fear that's not what Republicans would change the filibuster to do. I do fear that there will be further capitulation or surrender or appeasement or accommodation of Democrats in D.C. as a result of the election returns from last week, whether it's because they make a worse or a bad shutdown deal, they make a bad deal with government funding between now and the end of the year or next year, whether they extend the Obamacare subsidies the Democrats want them to do, or they cancel some of the cuts that were in the big bill. But as it applies nationally and here in Virginia, Republicans, when we hold and wield power, it motivates Democrat opposition. When Republicans hold and wield power, as they have the last few years in Virginia, at least in divided government, and as they do now in D.C., it motivates Democrat opposition. But Republicans too often aren't using that power to truly advance their stated objectives. And as long as so many Republicans tepidly stand for a more moderate version of Democrat policies, we will lose. As long as Republicans also want Medicaid, food stamps or SNAP, Obamacare, farm subsidies, a so-called all-the-above energy strategy that includes wind and solar, and no reforms to save Social Security and Medicare, we will lose. As long as Republicans want to defend and support the massive, bloated federal workforce, instead of making the case for massive reductions, we will lose. As long as Republicans refuse to cut spending and shrink government and reverse government expansion and government overreach, we will lose. As long as Republicans place a premium on winning elections instead of fighting for the right things, we will lose. As long as Republicans continue to back up, surrender, accommodate, pacify, appease the leftist advance of the Democrat Party on the moral issues, we will lose. When voters are given a choice between a counterfeit or the moderate rhino establishment Republican and the real thing, the Democrat, too many voters will choose the real thing, the socialist Democrat. As long as Republicans accept government as the answer to our problems, government as the solution to anything other than national security and national defense, as long as Republicans accept populist giveaways as acceptable, voters will choose the real thing, not the substitute, not the counterfeit. Voters will choose Democrat. You can't outgive or outspend Santa Claus, and Democrats run as Santa Claus. As long as Republicans try to provide a more modest version of Democrat policies, instead of presenting a clear choice and outright exposure or rejection of Democrat parties, we will lose. We've not really tried as a party bold, courageous, true conservative policies, at least not in decades. Do we really believe in them? Or are we just willing to surrender and subordinate in a futile effort to achieve political victory? It doesn't work anyway. So how will Republicans respond to last Tuesday? Will they surrender and capitulate on policy and strategy looking to the midterms? That is a sure way to lose the midterms. Or will Republicans go for it and swing for the fences with refocused conservative policy? That's the path to victory for the country and at the ballot box. That's the way to take a step towards saving and keeping the republic. The republic is clearly at risk in Democrat hands. Everything we value and hold dear is at risk today. We're in a political war, and the enemy, the Democrat Party, is playing for keeps. They're playing to win. They have a completely different vision for America. So don't compromise with them. Don't copy them. Defeat them. I often said when I was elected to Congress 5 years ago, I didn't come to Washington to work with the Democrats, to compromise the Democrats. I came to Washington to defeat the Democrats. So thanks for joining me on this episode of the Good for America podcast. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast, rate this show, refer it to your friends, follow me on social media at Rep Bob Good. Let's keep the republic.